Take it away.
I'm going to go ahead. Hi. How's everybody doing? Good morning. Welcome to this session. I was very pleased to see that it was full, I guess. My partner, Sharon, was like, whoa, that filled up fast. So that's good news. Maybe y'all like the PowerPoint and are interested in the subject. I'm going to give a quick little intro to myself. I'm Stacey Brechler-Knaggs. I'm the Grants and Contracts Manager with the City of Flagstaff, Arizona. And I've been with the city 35 years, and February 36 years. I'm getting ready to think about retirement. And I've been doing grants for over 30 years, mostly federal and state grants. I also do our emergency management. I'm also the disaster recovery manager with the City of Flagstaff. City's population is about 80 to 100,000. We've got a university there, so 45 minutes from the Grand Canyon. Everybody been to the Grand Canyon? You haven't? Seventh wonder of the world. That's great. So beautiful place. I primarily do, like I said, federal and state grants. I do all from pre to post to the whole grant life cycle. We have about $18 million in budgeted revenue per year with our grants. I got a couple hundred active grants. Like I said, mostly federal, high dollar federal aviation. We own our airport and all sorts of different grants. And then I also oversee our contract management program, which is our development agreements, lease, license agreements, and intergovernmental agreements. So have a full staff behind me, which is great. So that's a little bit about me. And again, I've got 2 kids, and that's about it.
My name is Sharon Skinner. I'm the grants coordinator for the city of Mesa. We're the 3rd largest city in the state of Arizona. Surprise. And we have almost 500,000 people now. I am a grants office of 1. So we actually both have centralized systems, but our systems are a bit different. And one of the reasons that we paired up to do this is that we wanted to give you some ideas of how that works in different structures. We do about $32 million in federal grants alone, and another few million in other types of grants, including Indian gaming every year. And I am a fiction writer on the side, so that doesn't hopefully creep into my grants. So that's a little bit about me.
Sounds good.
20 years. I've been doing this for about 20 years. So
Yeah, so you got a wealth of information here. Our PowerPoint's got a lot of information. And so we're not going to do questions till the end. And if we even run out of time, because we really want to get the information out there to you. And then if we have time, we'll take questions at the end. Or you can always contact us, call us, email, that kind of thing. So are we ready to start? All right. Okay.
All right, so we have some objectives. So we're going to talk about the grant centralized office structure and how they can differ between large and smaller organizations. We're going to go very quickly through the grant life cycle because y'all should know that. Grant processes and procedures and how we have established those for our specific cities and for our structures. We're going to talk about compliance and tracking, reporting and monitoring, and how that ties in. And we're going to give you some useful tips, tools, and templates. And I know if you saw all the handouts, like almost overwhelming, but we wanted to give you a nice array of the types of tools that we've developed in order to make our lives a little bit easier and our jobs a little less crazy. And we're going to talk a little bit about grant management software tools.
So here's how this is going to go. I'm going to kind of take the lead. Sharon's going to jump in, cut me off if she needs to add any info. But we're going to make this kind of casual, back and forth, and share our knowledge with you guys. So we'll do it. So a little bit about my office is a centralized office. All grants go through my office. If it tastes, smells, looks like a grant, it comes to me. Tell the city manager all the time, don't touch it. If it looks like a grant, you better be talking to Stacey. And they're really good at it. They turn it over, so everything goes through our office. We do grant seeking. We help seek grants with agencies. If police department's looking for a bomb truck or something, we'll help look for those grants. They look too. I am the primary liaison with the federal, state, and local agencies. We try to keep our staff from not talking to them. I actually talked to a federal agency that said, don't ever have that person talk to me again. They do not know our lingo, right? Federal people like talking to grant managers. They want to talk to you. You know it. And they want to help you, and they want to talk to you. We also do pre- and post-award management. We manage large, complex, high-risk, confidential grants. I have FBI grants. I have narcotics grants with DEA. I've got federal aviation, just finished a $14 million runway mill and overlay project. So a lot of different types of projects that we see. Very much a team approach that we work together. I'm not a grant writer. Actually, how our structure is that we decided to spread our wings, and we have the divisions write their grants. So the lieutenant, or I just got through submitting a $1.5 million broadband grant, but our IT director wrote that. And then I peer review. I package it up for them. I put all the compliance and the forms together. They give me a 30, 60, 90 narrative, and I track change it. I'm almost like a peer reviewer, and I review it with them. But they're the experts. Sometimes it's hard to be the expert of everything. When we got a $1 million SWAT truck, our SWAT leader wrote that narrative. He knew what he needed. He knew what his team needed for that SWAT truck. And so they write it and send it to me, and then I do the review and the submission. And then at post-award, when we do get that award, I start building the team. So our accountant gets on board, our buyer gets on board if it's a procurement, legal, a project engineer if that's the design and construction project. So then that team starts growing. So it's very much a team approach, and we all work together for the goal of submitting that and getting that grant award and finishing the project. Do a lot of monitoring, implementation, compliance, and closeout, financial and performance reporting, and then our auditors, thank goodness I'm here because they're back at City. Because we're right now going through our audit. We're fiscal year is June through July, or July through June. So with that, I'll let Sharon talk about her structure.
So some of the differences, yes, it's a team approach, but the teams look different. In the city of Mesa, because our police department is so large, they actually have someone in that department who wears the grants hat. And so I work very closely with those individuals. They have one person who helps to write the proposals and another person in that department who does the monitoring and the fiscal management and all of that. I work very closely with them, but on the grants that they do all the time, the governor's DUI stuff, the highway safety stuff, some of the FEMA stuff, they don't need me. So I spend my time, again, I'm a grants office of one, so I spend that energy helping the smaller groups like maybe the arts folks who at the museum haven't had a grant in a long time and they want to write a grant, or library who wants to spread their wings and get something else going on. So I will do a lot more hands-on and a lot more of that helping them to build the team that Stacey does. But for Fire wrote a fabulous grant without me being there hardly at all until the time when it came to the peer review component. I always do the peer review before. Nothing leaves without it going past another set of eyes, and it's generally my eyes. So we also do that peer review process where they write the grant proposal, and then it goes by me. And I'll send it back to them after I've reviewed it. I'm the first reviewer. And then I send it back to them for the changes and updates, and they'll send it back through me again. Also, if they need a sculpting of a grant because it won't fit in the online application, it comes to me because I have mad skills at sculpting. I am good at editing, and so that is one of the key skills that I bring to the table. Then when it comes back to the whole monitoring and management piece, I'm much more engaged in a lot of that. So we have, for our really large departments that have big grants, like our housing department gets a lot of HUD money. They are our cognizant agency because we get most of our federal funding from them. I actually meet with them monthly, but it's not just me, it's them, it's finance, and if they have anything that they're doing with engineering, it's engineering. And same thing with transportation, same thing with our airport. We also have an airport. So we actually sit monthly and we look at where are we at, do we have to do a reimbursement, what what's working, what's not working, what are our activities and what are our milestones and have we accomplished them? Or maybe does this need to be closed out or can it? So we're a little different, but again, all the same work has to be accomplished. It's just that we do it in a slightly different manner.
Same, but different. All right, so grant life cycle, a lot of you are familiar with this, program development, pre-award, award, post-award, and closeout, and we're going to go through each of these sections. So program development, federal CFR, everybody knows what that is, super circular, everybody knows, has seen that now, that it's been in place. So we, all our grants, I pretty much run at the federal level. Even if it's a state grant, I keep it at the federal level. I make it comply at the federal level, because if you're complying at that level, your audits are going to go pretty good. Even if it's a state grant or a foundation grant or nonprofit, I kind of keep it consistent with our organization and try to keep it at a federal level. I actually had a grant that was not a federal grant. It was through a Water Infrastructure Authority, and it was a state grant. We ran it at a federal level, though. We kept it at a high level, and they ended up later saying, oh, we didn't realize there were EPA monies and Environmental Protection Agency money, and so I hope you complied. And I was like, what? You tell me after the grant's 90% done and it's now EPA money? So it was a really good lesson that I had kept it at that federal level. As far as the pass-through agency risk, you all know the new CFR talks about this agency risk review. And if you haven't submitted a federal grant, you better pass this first. You better make sure you pass this, because they are going to look at you. Your history of performance is huge. And a lot of you know that here. I'm not probably... I hope today you just get a few things out of today. You may not get tons. I think a lot of experts here in the room, but hopefully you get something out of today. But I remind agencies, before you submit a federal grant, you better pass that, because they're going to cut you out. You don't even get in the hopper. So they will cut you out quick.
Well, in the new way that things are done, because all of the agencies speak to each other now, because of the consistency that they're trying to get with all of the federal funding and all that, is that if you have any kind of a blip on the radar for maybe this person might be risky, all the agencies know it. So if your housing department does something that kind of gets them into hot water, then your FEMA grant is at risk. It didn't used to be that way a few years back. Each agency looked at you separately, but now they talk amongst themselves. They have a reporting system where they put that information in and it's shared. So for us, especially as cities or any large organization that gets a lot of different kinds of grants, you want to make sure that nobody over here is causing issues with your grants over here. So
good point. Yeah, so far the city has a gold star. That's what you want, and gold star with all the agencies, so they know your name and you get those grants. Develop ideas and needs for your proposal. I'm not going to go through every one of these, just kind of highlight. Acquire federal agency and community support. Talk to your funders. I hope you're talking to them. I float ideas by them. Economic Development Administration, we wanted a parking garage downtown where our old court building was going to be removed. I do a lot of EDA grants. I called them and I said, what about a parking garage? You think that'd float? And they're like, no, we're not interested right away. So make sure that you're, developing the ideas, talking to your federal agencies. You're identifying funding sources, leveraging, and collaborating. Think about your community at large and who could partner with you. Maybe it's an in-kind partnership, but now the world of collaborative grants management and collaborating, and that they see that you've reached into your community, that you're talking with your partners and saying, hey, what about this grant? Maybe it's not just support. Maybe it's in kind. Maybe there's more than just funding from them.
And the reason that it's so important to start here is because when you get to the point of managing the grant, you want to know that you did all the things right up front so that managing it is easy. And that's why we start at this point, and we start at the risk management, and we start at the planning level, and make sure you're grant ready, or that you've had the conversation with your program officers, so that when you get to the award, yay, we all want the awards. So when you get to the award component, you're not all of a sudden going, oh, now we have to manage this, because you've already put blocks in place to make sure that the management will be easy.
Yeah, great, thanks. Again, building those agency relationships. I fly out to FAA, Federal Aviation Administration. Sorry, I'm going to try to be good about acronyms here. But we fly out, we went to their open house. We didn't have a grant, we weren't applying for a grant, I didn't have a recent award. We just wanted to go visit with them. They invited us to their open house in LA and Los Angeles, and I said, let's take our team and go. Let's go say hi to them. And we visited with them, we had great conversations and really built those relationships are huge. If you don't have relationships with your funder, then go back and start creating them. Figure out how you can be talking to them, because they are there for you and they want to partner with you. And then attending conferences, of course, as you are doing. I want to go back to this assure you can manage the award. I don't know how often that happens, that you think, oh, I'm going for the bag of cash. I get the cash, and I can't really manage this. I don't have the resources and capacity. And I'll tell you, to turn back a grant after they have looked at your history of performance and you decline that grant because you can't manage it is not a good thing for you. Your gold star goes to, I don't know.
Gets a little tarnished.
A little tarnished, so thank you. Anything else on that, Sharon? All right. Pre-award. So thoroughly review your NOFA and your RFA if you aren't doing it. I actually sit down, this broadband grant, I sat down with our IT director, it was his first grant, and we went through page by page and highlighted and said, this is what you're going to do, this is what I'm going to do, this is what you need to comply with if you get the grant. You're going to get the grant. This is how you're going to. So we went through the whole document, not just at the application phase, also at the end, like you're going to get it and you better be ready to deal with it when you get it. And so analyze your organization's capabilities, develop it based on the agency's mission, administration, congressional initiatives. Right now, Department of Justice has a lot of initiatives out there. What they want to fund. They want to fund, we have 2 cops hiring. We have SAFER, which is the firefighters grant. We have 4 firefighters under that, but that was their initiative, boots on the ground. We want officers on the street. And so we made sure we understood their congressional initiative and what they're trying to do and to help us write the grant. I went and pulled up their mission and their initiatives to link in and use their same words to get that safer firefighters and those cops hiring right out of their initiative. So look at that kind of stuff.
One of the forms that you'll see in the attachments is a feasibility checklist. And we use that at the City of Mesa in order to have our departments, before we even sit down and do this stuff, I ask them to do the feasibility checklist just to make sure that the grant at least seems like it's something we can accomplish. So I use that tool, I make them walk through that little checklist, and because I want them thinking about it. Because people do get excited, money, there's money, we could do stuff, right? And, we can't always do what they want to do with the money that's out there. So that's one of the checklists that we've given you, is the feasibility checklist. And another one will be there's another one that we use that is used for the team that you put together and who's going to do what. It's very much like a project management sheet. Thanks.
And then just develop processes to simplify and streamline your activities and reporting. I have 200 active grants. Our grant representative is the one that's in the field working it, but they're reporting back to me. I kind of hover over, they say, and kind of monitor and watch. But I've really looked at streamlining our activities and tracking, and so that it's easy to kind of make sure that you're complying with your reports. And there's a spreadsheet later here that I'll kind of share with you how we're doing that. And request funds that match your narrative and scope of work. How many times have we wrote a scope and then we write the budget and the budget or something's not linking and we get points taken away because we did not match. We put in there that we wanted to buy equipment, but there's no budget for equipment. Well, then why did you write that you were going to ask for equipment? So just make sure that you're really looking side by side, that your budget and you're reading your narrative. I stick them side by side, and I'll highlight things in the narrative. Then I'll go to my budget, and I'll go, did that get in there? Did that get in there? And making sure that those two tie.
And it's especially important when you work with an organization the size of mine, because I don't do the budgets typically. They work with finance to do the budgets, and then they're doing the narrative. So when I do that initial review, that's one of the key things that I'm looking for, is to make sure that we've matched what we said we were going to do. I've been a reviewer at the federal, the state, the city, and now the foundational level. So I have some experience as a reviewer. So when I do the reviews of our grants internally, I put that hat on. I stop being the city grants coordinator and I become a reviewer, because I can't tell you how many times that exactly what Stacey is saying has happened. And I'd be reviewing a grant for the whatever organization I'm reviewing for, and we're going to use laptops to do blah, 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 but there's like no laptops in the budget, and there's nowhere in the narrative that it says we already have 10 laptops that we will use, or they'll be in kind. I mean, gosh, don't miss your in kind, right?
And then the last thing is ensure staff buy-in. If you need to go to council to get your council or anybody, your city managers, buy-in, do it early. Get it on there. Get your procurement, get your people on board early, so that you have that buy-in. And then one more thing back to Sharon's on this review thing. We just started a new system that I asked the departments to throw their name in. Somebody that wanted to review, our city managers, our business analysts, said, I'd love to review grants for you. And I said, great. So we took a layperson that has nothing to do with grants management, maybe just, and we start throwing out the applications to 5 staff members. Yeah. And they look at it. They don't even know what they're reading necessarily, but they're looking at it with a different lens of saying, I understand what you're asking for. I understand this broadband grant that you're asking for. I don't know anything about IT, but I can read it as a layperson, because you got to assume that your reviewers don't all know that technical side of things. So start looking in your organization for people that can review other than yourself. And I'll tell you, they catch a lot of stuff. So just think about that kind of thing. Notice of award, reviewing. How are we doing? Everybody good? All right. Reviewing and accepting award. At this phase, I think we forget, you can negotiate at this phase. You know that? You negotiate here. Don't think you just have to accept that award. If you do not like that period of performance, you do not like the scope anymore, you do not have enough money in there, maybe they can throw money to it, maybe it's a deduct for you, but this is your phase to negotiate your award. And I think we think that, oh, I got the award, I can't do that with the federal agency. I do it all the time with them. I change it if I need to change it, so I'm not amending it later. So you can do that at that time. Period of performance, the POP. Everybody knows that. I'm constantly reminding our staff of the POP. Do not start your grant until you get the period of performance. You're not eligible, right? Unless the grant has pre-award. And in some cases you can. But apply, get the award, and procure. Our staff half the time want to start procuring, and I'm like, we don't even have the POP. So hold on. But be cognizant of that, your scope of work, your general terms and conditions, your special. Make sure that you're reviewing all that, especially your special terms and conditions. There's sometimes some real strict procurement requirements that you may have, leasing requirements. One of our grants with Economic Development Administration, we did a business accelerator project, and they had a covenant and lease and ownership on the property for 20 years. 20 years. I was like, it was in that special conditions, but I had to remind our division and our city manager that they own this. It's for the intended purpose for 20 years. We all are good with that. That showed up in that special condition. I think I probably knew it at the time of application, but then it hit hard when all of a sudden it was there. that it could not be anything but an incubator or an accelerator for 20 years, and that they own it. So
Yeah, that's all part of knowing what you're getting yourself into. And so when we have the notice of award, we do another meeting, just like the planning group. We bring everybody together and we read the entire notice of award. And what's glorious now is that the feds are required to give you all the information as part of that. Used to be you got a 424. I don't know how many people have been around, but you used to get a 424 with maybe a couple of little notes at the bottom and COMB whatever, or 200 whatever. So you used to have to look all that stuff up. But now you get 15 pages and it's all in there. And it's 15 pages or 16 pages or 20 pages, but all the information's there. And everyone who's going to touch that grant needs to know what's in that award. Every single person needs to know, because otherwise you're going to get yourself in trouble. Somebody's going to try and, I don't know, get reimbursement for work gloves, and that wasn't in the grant. And that's going to be a big red flag. So those kinds of things happen if you have a lot of people touching the grant. So we all get together in one big meeting. We go through the NOFA, the Notice of Award, the NOAA, and we assign who's responsible for what, and we all want to understand it. So that's a great time for people to ask questions, especially, and I'll sit in on those meetings because there are people who don't know 2 CFR 200, right? And in fact, I did a training, an internal training at the city a couple of years ago, right after the new OMB super circular came out, so that I could talk to them about the new things and what had changed. And at one point, I invited in all the finance people, because that's where we were having a lot of problems. And I actually had someone say to me, "Oh, so that's why they make us do that." You know, it's because the Fed said so, not because the department director decided, oh, you need to do it this way. And people just don't necessarily know. So our job is to educate all the time, educate the people in our organizations.
One more thing, Sharon, kind of reminded me of, when you're looking at your period of performance and all your stuff in your notice of award and your special conditions, look at those interim deadlines. Sometimes you have an interim deadline. Our business accelerator, we just finished with as an $8 million project. They had the period of performance, and they had all these other little deadlines I had to hit within the period of performance. And I saw it. I guess we all knew it. And all of a sudden they were like, "Did you start?" And I said, "Well, we're working on our design plans." They said, "No, you have to start some type of construction. Go out and clear your site. Get a backhoe out there and take a picture. Clear the site. Get some weeds taken care of." And literally, the federal agency said, remove the weeds, show some skinned dirt, and take a picture of the equipment out there, and we'll consider that your start. But it was an interim start. It was within the period of performance. So make sure that you're looking at all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, you have all your compliance documents, your performance reports, your equal opportunity plan for Department of Justice grants. Anything over $500,000, we have to have an EEOP. So make sure that you're keeping up with your compliance plans so that you can accept that award. Post-award, financial and program management compliance. Performance measurements, I'm not going to go through a lot of this. Financial management, we have a grant fund. We budget 80% of the grants that we think we're going to get. So right away, we set up a grant account for it at the budget level. We have a grants revenue sheet that goes in our budget book, and it shows all the grant. It's got an account number, and it's already assigned before we apply. And so it's there for the council to see what we're potentially applying for and to appropriate those grant funds. So that's where that $18 million in budgeted revenue are grants that we are going for that we're 80% sure we're going to get. And they're the standard Governor's Office of Highway Safety ones. Some of them are annual grants. But we've already got an account identified and ready to go once that award shows up.
And I'm an English major, so I'm not, I see the budget after, it's all done and it comes back, and I'm kind of seeing the matrix. Right? So I'm lucky. I have 2 people in the finance department whose job it is to manage the funds for the grants. So whenever I get matrixed, I go and see them because honestly, those people speak numbers. It's great.
All right, post-award, internal controls. We all know internal controls, right? Are we looking at them? You better be. I am constantly spending time here. The accountants, my staff, we are always looking at our internal controls. What can we change to improve? Things that our auditors catch. Things that, may not be a significant deficiency, but might be an internal control that they've saw that you can enhance. So always do this. The Government Accountability Office Standard for Internal Controls, that book, the blue book, is great. If you haven't gone through it, it's actually exciting read. No. But it's actually very interesting to read because we're not accountants, a lot of us. But I'll tell you, to go in and read the GAO's internal control list, it talks a lot about grant management. It talks about things that you should be doing as a grant manager to comply with your federal and state awards.
How many people here went and revisited with their finance department when the new super circular came out and the changes in small equipment purchases came out, or the more recent one? How many people did that? How many people went to your procurement people, your contracts people, and said, hey, we need to add small business, minority business, women's business, all these things in when the super circular came out? Think about those kinds of things, because it's really on us to know those things. That's our job. And my procurement office didn't know what I was talking about at first. And I actually had stopped our contracts person in the hallway, and he was, oh yeah, no, we have all this. And I said, no, I looked at your contract. It's not in there. You need to add this, this, and this. So be aware that sometimes it's on us to go and make sure that the other departments where we work are actually putting in the things that we know belong there for grants. I know Stacey has a checkbox. So if it's a grant, it goes one way. And if it's a non-grant, it goes another way. And so when it's a grant, certain things have to be in those contracts, yeah.
Yeah, so purchasing has a checklist. Their first question they ask the staff member, is this grant funded, yes or no? And if it's a yes, guess who you better be talking to? You better be talking to the grants office so that you're starting that procurement process. Make sure, of course, you're looking at your cost sharing and matching. A lot of times there's a lot of different sources here. You might have cash match, in-kind match. You might have other general fund city match to projects. We have a lot of those that it's a $1 million project, but we need to add additional funds. But you still have to be tracking those additional funds because it's all about the total project cost. So be watching that. And then revisions to budget, program plans, and scope of work. Make sure you're staying on top of that. If your scope's changing and you don't know if it takes a revision, call your agency. Call them. I'll call them and say, hey, got a little twist, a little thing in the scope changing. What do you think? Is it going to take an amendment or a full scope revision or anything? And they'll say, nah, you know what? Let's do it administrative. Send me an email. Let me know what's happening. And we'll do that. I'm getting tripped up here.
And key in on that email. So I had an issue with my housing department at one point where they said, well, they told us over the phone. And I'm like, no. No. Hang up, send them an email. Even if they won't send it to you on email, you hang up the phone after the conversation and you say, thank you for having a conversation with me. I understand, based on our conversation, that we are going to do it this way. And if they don't say no, now at least you have a paper trail that says that you heard that from them. Yeah.
Good point, because I've actually produced that email for an audit that said, they said I can change the scope. And I don't have an amendment, and they were looking for a grant amendment, and I'm like, no. They said it was cool, I could do this. But I had that email that said administrative change, and that we could do that. Post-award, procurement. I spent a lot of time here.
We talked about that a little bit.
Huh?
Talked a little bit about that.
Yeah, we did, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time. That's a $1 million SWAT truck with Homeland Security, Department of Homeland Security, and at Christmas, the guys all got on that and gave it to me as a Christmas gift in a frame. But they brought it from New York and called me and said, hey, we're on our way. We're like 30 miles out of Flagstaff. Come meet us at the PD and let's drive it around. And you bought it, and I'm like, okay, sure, I'll drive the SWAT truck around the parking lot. I didn't get too far. But that was a big procurement and was really strict, of course, with our procurement standards, right? We all have to comply with those procurement standards. And they're really into this competition, open and fair competition. The feds want that. So you better be following your federal guidelines, which trump sometimes your local procurement, but you'll read in there, it says follow your local procurement policy, right? But don't just stand on that alone. Make sure that you look at the federal guidelines and there's something that does say different, or your grant agreement, because sometimes it does say a little different than your local procurement. And so they'll just make sure that you're looking at all of that. Of course, this is the federal procurement methods. We don't follow those because we're required to follow our local methods, which are lower than those amounts. And then Sharon talked a little bit about your contracting, small business, and then contract provisions. So when purchasing comes to me, yes or no, that you are, is this a grant procurement or not? As soon as it's a yes, they're coming to our office and we're creating those grant provisions. We're looking at their requests for statement of qualifications. We're adding grant provisions. We're adding funding acknowledgement. We're reviewing that procurement bid contract or that our request for proposal. So our office is also looking at those. So you should be looking all the way around. And I'm going to turn this back to you, Sharon, in 2 seconds. But, I lost my train of thought.
Well, I was just going to say the small purchase up here, you had said, yours is lower. City of Mesa is lower too, and it's prescribed by voter initiative, so we can't change it. I had a department who came running to me, it's 200,000 now, and I said, no, it's not.
And then I do remember what I was going to say on this non-competitive purchase. Those are sole source. And so make sure that if you sole source something, that you are getting not just your internal procurement approval, but your agency approval. And recently on this economic development grant, they said, well, that's not really a sole source. And I said, well, what do you want to talk about it? We have to stay with our same HVA system. It was the same system we had at City Hall. And I said, how about continuity of maintenance? Sounds great. Send me a letter for continuity of maintenance. We're not going to call it sole source. We're going to say the city uses the same HVA system in all their facilities, and we're going to allow it in this facility. And so we were able to go directly to that vendor for our HVA system.
So a lot of times we look at it and we feel like the funder is up there and they're out there, and we don't know that we can talk to them. We don't feel comfortable talking to them. And what if I ask a stupid question, right, kind of thing? And there are none. And the funder would much rather have you ask a question that they have to answer, and they have to answer you, and they have to answer you, and they have to answer you the same question, than to later come back and find you out of compliance because you didn't ask the question. So ask the question. And this is true with any funder. It's not just the feds. It's true with any funder. They would rather you ask the question. I had a situation where we had a very large grant from a foundation. And when I came on board, we were almost a full year into the grant, and the reporting kept getting rejected. And we were at the point of losing that grant when I stepped in and I looked at what they were doing, and I said, well, these forms aren't working for us. Why aren't we asking the funder how to use the forms properly, since we don't seem to be able to use them? And so I reached out to the funder, and they sent me a 3-page document on how to use those forms. No one had that. No one had it, right, for a year. So they decided they liked me, and I became the point of contact for that funder from then on, and we saved the grant. So that was a big deal. But everybody else was afraid to ask the question. We should know this. We feel like, oh, we should know this. We should know the answer. If you don't know the answer, you don't know the answer. Just ask. They'd much rather you do that. Yeah.
Great point. Yeah, talk to them. I call them weekly sometimes. We're talking. Just to say, hey, how you doing? How's your family? Here's an update on the grant. And that kind of jumps, I'm going to bounce around here, but that kind of jumps to that significant and favorable development. It may not take a scope change. It may not take a budget revision. It may not take a time extension. This is just, hey, project's going great. How'd you like to come out and see it? How would you like to do a celebration with this at the end? What are you feeling about this? Or a significant. Don't be afraid to tell them things are crashing. We're bombing. we're not spending, we've got some problems, the contractor's not performing, we've got, maybe you're in a dispute with your contractor. Things have stalled. Let them know. They need to know that because they are on your side. They want to see you get your project done. So be talking to them. They love it when I call, and they like it when I tell them good and bad stuff. They want to know.
They really don't want the paperwork either.
No.
The non-compliance paperwork, all the reporting, they don't want that.
Another thing I do, and as I said, it was a centralized office, that performance and financial reports. I have our grant representatives doing our quarterly reports. We do quarterly. We do not do monthly. Anything I can do, and when I look at that grant, when I first get it, if it says monthly, I'll go back and negotiate quarterly. We don't have the staff time. We're full. All of you are busy. We have high capacity at the city, but we need things on a quarterly basis, and we can't do those monthly reports unless it's mandated. But all those performance reports are done by the field person, the project rep. The grant accountant does and we have 3 or 4 grant accountants that take it by their fund. They do the financial report. They slap a cover letter on it, and it routes through, and the last signature is me for compliance. And I see that financial report, I see that progress report, and I can catch things. I got a progress report that says we're 50% complete, and I have a financial report that says 0 for that quarter. What's the matter? We got a problem here. And I can go back to the police department or whoever it is and say, where did you buy this stuff from? And they go, oh, this patrol account 2207. I'm like, what? You didn't use your grant account? I can't find it in your patrol. No wonder we showed 0. So our accountant couldn't even find it. Didn't know they had any expenses. So both those reports come in to me, and I e-sign it, and then our department sends it off. So everything's funneled through our office so that we can kind of read their narratives of their performance report. I can look at the financial report, and I'm not looking at that for the cents and pennies. I'm not even looking at the accounting of it. I'm looking that there's no food, 6-pack of beer, that kind of
Work
thing.
gloves.
You get it? I actually had an air rescue firefighting facility that we built a few years back, and I saw soap, hand lotion, shampoo. I was like, what? What are we doing? Oh, well, we're filling the building. I thought that was all part of the grant, that they would buy toilet paper. And I said, no. The feds aren't paying for that. That's operational costs. No, I'm not putting that on a pay request for you to have shampoo in the showers since they stay there 24/7. So. And
for our major grants, we do monthly meetings where the key personnel are there. I'm there, finance is there, whichever department has gotten the grant is there, and if anyone else is involved, say engineering or one of the other departments, all of us sit at a table once a month, and we look at where we're at on activities, we look at where we're at on expenditures, we look at where we're at on reimbursement requests, and then everybody gets their walk-in papers from there to go and do whatever we're behind on or to explain where we're at. So I'm, again, touching base all the time. And then those things do route through me. But I also am monthly sitting with the really big grants.
That's what we do. We have quarterly meetings with our fire, police, depending on the grant. I also, when I reference back to that business accelerator, I was at every weekly construction meeting. I was sitting with a contractor. We were looking at Davis-Bacon. We were talking. I'm out in the field. I do our disaster recovery. We just had a museum fire in Flagstaff in July, if you hadn't seen it, in Arizona. And Friday, I am working with FEMA to get reimbursed. So I'm going out to the fire on Friday. I'm going to put my Levi's and boots on, and I'm going out to the field. Our auditors all the time saying, did you see that SWAT truck? Yeah, I drove it. But they like that. You better be seeing what your grants are getting. Go out there, be with your people in the field and see it and see what that grant's actually doing. And it should make you feel good. You're getting projects done. You're implementing things for your community, and you got your boots on the ground too with them. Post-award. I think we're doing pretty good on time. We're whipping through this, but a lot of information. Subrecipient monitoring. We all have subrecipients, right? I handle our community development block grant also, so we have a number of subrecipients through housing, through HUD. Remember, subrecipient versus contractor, they are different. We all know that in the CFR. when I talk about the CFR, and Sharon does too, and that we hold our grants to the federal regulation, on my desktop is the CFR. I click on it all the time. I go look back at cost eligibility. I look at procurement. I'm going to that all the time. When our accountant walks in or we're dealing with a subrecipient, I always have that there at your fingertips so that you can go back and refresh. We got a lot of stuff that we do, so make sure that you're looking at that. Requirements for your pass-through agency are identified in the CFR. Records retention and access, make sure that you're keeping those for your amount of time. We actually, the state law, I think is 5 years for Arizona. I keep it 7, but I don't even close my grants until after the audit. So I add a couple years and I don't close it till after we've received a clean audit. Then my staff archives and closes the file. And then remedies for noncompliance if you need to do any of that. Anything on that side? Okay. Closeout. Make sure that you're looking at your general and special conditions, your programmatic and financial objectives are met, your closeout reports or deliverables. A lot of times we think we spent all the money. Yeah, well, you did, but did you give them that master plan? Did the master plan get done for the airport master plan? We spent all the money, but they still were going through review. So that grant doesn't close because your deliverables have not happened on the programmatic side of it. So make sure that everything's done. We have a mandatory closeout letter that I sign that my staff prepares. Every grant, regardless of the agency requiring it, I say do a closeout letter. Tell me we got the deliverables. Tell me we got the final check, we received it. Tell me that you have that, that we don't have any audit issues. Go through the file. So my grant specialist goes through that file, does a closeout letter, regardless. We send it to the funder, and sometimes the funder doesn't respond. Sometimes they do and say, thank you. We agree with closing out this project.
Don't be afraid to be the person driving that, is what she's really saying, is because a lot of times you'll wait and you'll wait and you'll wait and they will never get back to you to close out if it's coming from them. But if you have all your ducks in a row and you can send the letter out, again, it goes back to that, at least you have a paper trail saying, I did this, right? And maybe you officially can't close it out if they don't respond, but a lot of times they will respond and they'll agree with you and they'll say yes, or they'll let you know if they're missing something, and that happens sometimes.
Yeah, and they do. I've had them say, well, I didn't get this report. I know I sent that to you. Let me send it again. And then they were like, cool, I found it, I got it. I'll send you a closeout letter. So make sure you're doing that. Celebrate. We went out on the runway. We did a mill and overlay, an $8 million, lot of asphalt on runways. But we went out there. We had it striped. We had the council come out, and we went out onto the runway. We had to shut down the airport for a week anyway to do the project. But we went out and celebrated. Took pictures out in the middle of the runway. It was great, and we had the FAA come out. We had all sorts of people there. I had a congressman come out. It was great. But celebrate your projects, even if they're small. So the small ones and the big ones are important. So celebrate the success, and you be a part of that because you were a critical part of getting that funding for them. And so be a part of that team and celebrate. Closeout adjustments. Make sure that if there's anything that needs to be done there, and any additional performance reporting. This is really interesting. EDA grant has a 3, 6, and 9-year performance report after project completion. So I still have a 9-year report for the Business Accelerator. I've did the 3 and 6. Oh, actually, I have a 6-year and a 9-year left. And I'm probably going to be retired. So so I've calendared it in, but I have a 6-year report left and a 9-year report after the grant's been completed, closed, the whole bit. So guess what? Did I close my grant? No, because I had a report, and I told my staff that does not get closed until the final report is due. And so,
And done.
Anything else on that? Okay. And then we'll get into forms of processing. How are we doing? Good.
Okay.
No, I don't. No, I don't. Don't. She's giving me the wave here.
We do.
So
I think we have a
question.
So I think we have a question from our audience at home.
So a few minutes ago, you were talking about software wondered, do you each have your own internal municipal grant management system? Because they had to create their own with other departments in the local municipality.
So the question is do we have our own grants management system, software system, because they had to create their own? Okay.
Yes, I have American Funding Innovators Grants Navigator that we had eCivis for a while on the grant seeking on the pre-award side, and then they were still building their post-award and management side. I ended up jumping to AFI and Grant Navigator. Wonderful, I love them. Now, it works for our city. It's not, there's a ton of them out there, Zoom grants, the other ones. I mean, it really is what works for your city. They are costly at times, but it has been great. We were having an issue because of the couple hundred active grants and reporting. Our accountants weren't staying on top of it. Maybe the project rep wasn't, and it sends an automated email so we could put the task in as a report. It automates it and sends an email saying you have a report due. It also sets it up and has a grant deadline. Your grant's getting ready to expire. So there's a lot of tools that help automate it to make our job a little easier.
And for the city of Mesa, we have a financial system that has a component that's called the grant lifecycle management component, but really technically it doesn't track activities. It only tracks once it's in the system, it becomes a financial system, so it only tracks the finances. And so one of the reasons I have my monthly meetings, especially with the bigger grants, is because of that. And I'm working right now to develop something that's not completely redundant, right, that I can manage with all the city grants. So yeah, sometimes you just have to drop back and build something that will work for you.
I have a spreadsheet later in here that does tracking, and I had our contract specialist put it together for me. And it's kind of a redundant system with the AFI, but it's actually a one-stop shop. I can look at all my grants and kind of see. So we'll get to that and show you. But this is because we are a centralized office. I have this form that goes with the grant application. Sometimes this form goes at 90%, and I'm routing it to the city manager, getting his signature, maybe on the certifications or something. And maybe its narrative's not 100% buttoned up, but I can at least get him signing the forms, and then we can tweak it at the last minute. But this kind of talks about a little bit of high level of program stuff, the CFDA, where your match is coming from, who's the project rep that's doing it, and then it takes my signature, the management services director that's looking at it for finance and budget. If it's $1 million match, they're looking to see that we have the appropriations, and then the city manager signs. And the city manager's signing to make sure it fits with our council goals and that it aligns with our organization and what we want. He can stop it before it goes out the door. However, I'm the authorized rep and the e-business point of contact for grants.gov, the SAMS person, all those kind of things. So there's times where we have a deal that if the grant's due, I'm going to submit. I'm not going to wait for your signature. So if I've reviewed it and I feel pretty good about it, I could go ahead and submit and we follow up with this, but at least it gets in front of his eyes that he's not surprised that we submitted a $1.5 million broadband grant and you didn't know anything about it. So it's a great form, and that happens. How often do we have, where they're going, I didn't know we submitted that. I didn't want to do that. That doesn't even fit. Council doesn't care about that. So this is just a great form for your internal routing, and we use it for every application to route that through.
For us, because we do have that financial system with that grant lifecycle management component to it, on the front end, we have a document that is electronic that goes in that's a grant opportunity document, and I get notified every time one of those is filled out. And then when there's another one back behind that one that's a grant application, so every time someone goes forward to apply, I again get notified. So I can go into the system and look at who's applying for what at any given time. I am the point of contact for our grants for our federal level. In fact, I'm the point of contact for anything that has a system that is online. So grants.gov, sam.gov, and some of the reimbursement systems, all of that. I'm the main point of contact for that. But I have assigned AORs for various departments. So the larger departments have their AORs, it's usually the department director, so they have the ability to, because they know what council wants and that sort of thing, so.
And make sure, and I see you, this form does that. It's kind of your gatekeeper. You're not to submit a grant application unless you do a grant manager submittal form, and then you've got these 3 approvals. It's your way for that staff to not submit without you knowing, or walk around going, I got a $100,000 check, I don't know what to do with it, showed up with the grant. How often have we had that? That they show up and they're walking around going, oh, I didn't tell you I applied, and now I got 100,000. Like, oh yeah.
Oh, and it's 100% match.
Yeah, and it's 100% match. So this was our kind of a gatekeeper saying, I know I've been working with you on the 30, 60, 90. We're at 90%. I need that grant manager submittal form for us to route it through for approval. Yes, question. Okay, we're good. This is, we do a lot of pass-through grants sometimes with foundations and nonprofits that it has to be applied through a local government. We are very careful. My policy in my office is to not apply for nonprofit funds because our nonprofits are struggling to get funds, so we try not to compete with them locally. We try to stay with the federal, state, and the grants that can only come to local governments. But we do have occasions where we do tribal gaming or we do a pass-through with state parks. And I have our agent, I give this to them and say, fill this out, answer these questions. And it's a pre-risk review. As the fiscal agent, as the city, I'm not going to pass through a $100,000 grant to an agency that just started a week ago. Right? Or doesn't have a financial plan, doesn't have any business plan, but they want to get the 100,000. But yeah, so you're on the hook if you're going to be that fiscal agent or that pass-through. So this is just kind of a form that I put together. It kind of gives me the highlight of the questions for if I'm going to pass that through.
Yeah, we do a risk assessment for all of the pass-through recipients for anything that's federal, CDBG, that sort of thing. We typically do not do any other types of pass-through except the tribal gaming, in which case we are not fiscally responsible. We make sure that in all of our intergovernmental agreements and all of the paperwork that we prepare, that with the Indian gaming, we're simply passing it through. We're not responsible. We wash our hands, and it's between them and the tribe. But we definitely also don't compete with our local nonprofits for the most part because, yeah, they need the money, and we don't do direct services as a city for most things.
All right. I'm also on the United Way Board, and I do our community investment funds, and so I actually sit as a funder on that side with our nonprofits. So it's kind of it's been kind of nice to be able to help the nonprofits that way, but get our own grants for the government. So, and we also do tribal gaming that funds. Internal controls. Again, I said I was big on internal controls. I've learned over 35 years to have them to pass audits. Department of Justice has this form that I submit for a number of our Department of Justice grants. And it's I pulled it up because I think it's just a good little checkbox. If you get a chance to go through this form and fill it out, you will know right away if you have good, strong internal controls. And if you have a checkbox that says no, you don't, then you can go back to your agency and you can work on them. You can say, you know what, I had to say no to this. I can't see it that close. I have my glasses on, but we said no to it. We may have a problem with our internal controls. And so I thought it's just a good little form that will help you kind of check box and say, yeah, we pass. We can pass a Department of Justice internal control questionnaire.
And this is also in your attachments.
Yeah, it's in your attachments. But if you can pass this, it's a pretty good one. You know that your agency and your grants are going to be pretty strong. Grant snapshot. My staff does this after we get the grant award. He creates a grant snapshot, and he goes through the document. He pulls all this information, any special conditions, and he sends this out to the grant reps. And so the grant rep can see everything. They don't have to read the whole document. He's already read it and captured everything. And so it's a great one-stop kind of snapshot of your grant award, and we can pull it up, you can see what the period of performance, you don't have to pull up the whole grant agreement, but because you've dumped it into this snapshot. So this has been a really useful form. We just implemented it maybe 6 months, a year ago, and the staff, the grant reps out in the field love it because they can go right to this instead of pulling up. And they don't know how to read grant agreements, right? You know, they're like, I don't know where everything's at. So this grant snapshot's great.
And I'm stealing this, by the way.
Sharon was like, what? I like that form. I said, yeah,
and
take
it's
it.
pretty.
Use it.
You didn't build a nice form.
And that's just kind of the back side of it. But it's got a lot of information that we can fill in there and send to our grant representatives and to the accountants and so forth. So, and it can be updated as you get information. You can update it. Grant reporting deadline spreadsheet. This is a lot of information, but we have a couple hundred active grants. And my staff helped create this because I needed one. AFI is by project. And so I could go in and see all the projects under city admin or under management services. But this was just a spreadsheet that we can look at. I have quarterly meetings with the accountants to go through all of this, and we have quarterly meetings with our grant reps. But it was just a one-stop shop for us to put all the grants. So every time we get a grant, we log in the information. There's a section over, and I'll get to it. There's a section that has comments that says, GOHS only wants hard copy, blue ink, no electronic. The project officer is this. But it's just been a really good, quick location for the finance manager and me to kind of go and look at. We can go into a tab that has performance reporting, and I could see what is yellow, red, what is black that we did not submit. We're behind in a performance report. So what happened is the finance manager says, I got 5, 6 accountants. I don't know what is due. I don't know and where to go to know what is due. I can't go through each of these 200 grants. So can we make one consolidated spreadsheet that can look at all the grants, all the information? I can hit on a financial tab, and I can see what my accountants are submitting. And so it was a great spreadsheet for my staff. It's in your forms, by the way. And you may not, just look, you could be able to create the headers or something, and I can send it to you if you did need a Excel copy of it. But anyway, it's just been a great tool for us. You can see we have a black that, is past due. And so it's a great place to look if you have monitoring and oversight of a number of grants.
And so with the City of Mesa, with a CGI system that we have that is the financial system, I can actually pull up a report and see if a grant is still open or closed and when it was supposed to be closed and why isn't it closed and did we get an extension, and I can go back to the department and ask those questions. So I actually have that piece of it that is in that system. Again, it doesn't do specific activity and milestone collection on that data, but the financial piece and the period of performance, that's all in there. So I don't have a spreadsheet like this, but I do have a report that I can pull up.
But she asked for it.
I want to see it.
Yeah, I'm going to send it to you.
I'm going to play with this.
Surplus property, super quick here. This is just an issue that came up. We buy a lot of fire trucks, aircraft rescue firefighting vehicles, and we were seeing things go to surplus, and they were like, I think it's on our fixed asset. I think it might have been grant funded. I was like, what? You don't get rid of $1 million fire truck without checking and making sure our property disposition and everything else. So we created this form that right away says, stop. This is a grant funded vehicle. You better be talking to the grants office. So it kind of another compliance issue document that we created for surplus property that's grant funded. And then Sharon.
So this is the grant feasibility, project feasibility planning checklist that I developed. And it's really pretty basic. It just it's things like, is it a mission match? Is it, do we have the in-kind to do the match? Is it, what kinds of things do we need to know up front before we even embark upon applying for this particular grant opportunity? It makes the department stop and think, and this way you don't end up with a swap monkey. Yeah, grant for a swap monkey, I'm just saying. It's happened. This is This is the financial checklist that I ask departments to take a look at. This also talks about in-kind. This is once you're really getting into the weeds. And this is talking more about the nitty-gritty of the financial components of it. Whether or not we're using contractors, consultants, things like that. So will we need to go out for bidding for a portion of this contract, that kind of, or this grant, that kind of thing. And this is just a checklist that we use along the way. And then we have a grants checklist. I have two. One for under $25,000 because that is a set limit that the city has for council approval, and one for over $25,000. They're very similar, but because we use two, I wanted you to see the fact that we use two different checklists because we have to go through different steps depending on the amount of the grant or what it includes. So our grant policy is only a few pages long. The procedures are not in there. You would think with a city our size, we'd have this huge policy. We do not. It's only, I think, 5 or 6 pages long, if that. And the key components of it that are important to me are the triggers that send it to council. So we have certain triggers, a certain dollar amount, whether or not new jobs, new positions are included, that sort of thing, or if the funder requires an upfront council resolution, those kinds of things. So depending on which checklist we need to use and which triggers are being, triggered, then we use a different form for that. And these, again, are all in your attachments. Feel free to take these and make them your own, use them. If one of mine works and one of Stacey's doesn't, that's fine, vice versa. Toss mine in the trash if they're not going to work for you. But this is a good starting point to see how we've developed what we do. And we're always out to learn, which is why I want some of her stuff now, right?
Anything on that one?
The grant management. Go one more. The grant management checklist, this is that one I was talking about that's the project management type of form. This is an opportunity for everybody to sit down in the room at the award stage and say who's going to be responsible for what. There's an opportunity for large organizations to become very silo-oriented, where they don't talk and they don't work together. When I first came to the city, we had an issue where one department would get the grant and they would hand it off to, say, engineering, and then engineering would spend the money, but then when something was not correct, it would be blamed on, no one could take the blame. No one would take ownership or responsibility, I shouldn't say blame, ownership or responsibility for what wasn't done right because, well, they spent it, but it's their grant. One of the things that I did when I first came on board was help develop that grant policy, and in that policy it says the grantee is the department who receives the grant, and if they work with any other department, that department becomes a sub-recipient of the grant and is managed as a sub-recipient. And then we have a closeout. We have a checklist for the closeout to make sure that, just like with Stacey, that all of the boxes are checked before we feel that we're able to close it out. So,
resources, if you don't already know them, of course, grants.gov, SAMS, Federal Register. I get an email every day on the Federal Register. It's really exciting to read. No, but you can scan it. You can get a Federal Register for each federal department. Of course, OMB and the Foundation Center. And then just a couple last slides, mine, as far as our grants. This is what we do. We put the dollars, the people, and the projects together. I really believe we're brokers, that we find the money for our community and our staff and our citizens, and we do projects, and we get stuff. One's a Zero scapeguarding. That's an air rescue firefighting truck. They're very expensive. That's our runway extension, was $18 million. Do a lot of fire thinning projects. Did a restoration on a pond. This is a disaster recovery project, Schultz Fire. If you hadn't heard of it, it blew out our water line. And so that was a $15 million project for me. I was up at this site every week, walking that road and looking at the how they were encapsulating the pipe. This is our business accelerator. That's a Quint by Homeland Security, and then, of course, the motorcycles. But just kind of some things that we have bought with grant funds that I think is important to what we do. You should all pat yourself on the back for what you do for your community, because you really are a major resource and there for your citizens.
And some of the fun stuff that we've done in Mesa with grant funding. And I will say that what isn't pictured here, because it's difficult to picture, is that the City of Mesa Medical and Fire Department, or Fire and Medical Department, sorry, got a cooperative grant through Medicare a few years back, and it was to test a theory about transporting and not transporting, because 90% of what we are seeing in the community isn't fires anymore, it's medical, right? And we had a 3-year grant for that to test out to see if we could add small vehicles that could go out into the community when you get called from someone because they didn't have the money to go to the hospital and get their diabetes medication or whatever it is, their insulin, and have someone on that vehicle who could prescribe right then and there, do the prescription, and also give them the medication that they needed. It turned out that it saved a ton of money, but we weren't able to immediately turn that into an implemented project because the state regulations for medical got in the way. Well, our fire chief has worked quite closely with many other fire chiefs in the state and other departments, and we are actually getting that changed now. So they are changing the regulations and requirements, and that will soon be a new innovative way for going out into the community, and it'll save tons of money because people won't be transported to emergency rooms as often. So that's just my moment of braggadocio.
Hey, I want to thank you all.
We
may have a couple minutes for questions, 5 minutes for questions if you have any. If not, I know we're right before lunch. But I want to thank you all for being here. Hopefully you got something out of it today, or at least some forms, if anything, right?
It's a lot.
All right.
Thank you so much.